We like to think we're pretty tough today. But what if you dropped your current body right into the middle of the year 1347? Right now, we have hand sanitizer, clean water, and antibiotics. Back then, they literally threw their waste out the window and into the streets. Before we get into it, here are 4 crazy facts about that time. First, doctors thought sniffing bad smells caused disease. Second, armies threw dead bodies over city walls as weapons. Third, people thought taking a bath opened up your pores to sickness. And fourth, fleas on rats wiped out half of Europe. I'm just a guy reading stories, so subscribe if you want to hear more crazy stuff. Where are you listening from tonight? Let me know in the comments. All right, let's jump into the year 1347. So here you are. You've just stepped off a time machine and landed right in the middle of a muddy street in the year 1347. You're probably wearing your favorite sneakers and thinking you're pretty well prepared because you take a multivitamin every morning. But I have some bad news for you. Your body is basically a high-end smartphone, and you just dropped it into a bucket of salt water. Right now, in the 21st century, your immune system is living a life of total luxury. You don't even realize it because it's just the way things are. Think about the last glass of water you drank. You didn't have to think twice about it. You turned a metal handle and clear, cold water came out. That water went through a massive treatment plant where people used chemicals and filters to kill every single living thing in it. When that water hits your stomach, your immune system doesn't even wake up. It stays asleep because there's nothing to fight. Now, look at your fridge. You've got a carton of milk in there. That milk has been pasteurized. That's just a fancy way of saying a factory boiled it just enough to kill the bacteria, but not enough to ruin the taste. You eat bread that's been wrapped in plastic and meat that's been inspected by government experts. You live in a world that has been scrubbed, bleached, and sanitized until it's almost sterile. Your immune system is like a world-class boxer who has never actually been in a real fight. It spends all day hitting a speed bag in a temperature-controlled gym. It's got the muscle, sure, but it has no idea what it's like to get punched in the face by a guy who hasn't washed his hands in 3 months. In 1347, everyone you see is carrying around a whole zoo of parasites. I'm talking about worms in their guts, lice in their hair, and fleas in their clothes. Their immune systems are in a literal street fight every single minute of every single day. They've been doing this since they were babies. If a kid in the Middle Ages survived to be 10 years old, it was because their body had learned how to deal with a constant flow of garbage, raw sewage, and rotten food. Their internal defenses are like a grizzled gang of mercenaries. They're mean, they're dirty, and they know exactly how to handle the local villains. Your immune system? It's bored. In fact, it's so bored that it starts attacking things that aren't even dangerous. That's why so many of us have allergies to things like peanuts or pollen. Our bodies are so desperate for a fight that they start swinging at dust bunnies. You might think your vaccines will save you. And look, vaccines are a miracle. You're probably protected against polio, measles, and mumps. That's great for the modern world. But here's the problem. Those vaccines are like high-tech body armor designed specifically to stop 21st century bullets. When you step into 1347, the world isn't shooting bullets at you. It's swinging a rusty mace at your head. Your polio shot isn't going to do a thing against the bacteria that causes the Black Death. It won't help you when you drink water that has human waste in it. It won't protect you when you eat a piece of bread that's covered in rye mold. You're prepared for the wrong war. You've brought a calculator to a sword fight.
The moment you take your first breath in a medieval city, your body is going to go into a state of total shock. It's not just the big diseases like the plague. It's the thousands of little things. It's the way the air smells like rotting meat and wood smoke. It's the fact that every surface you touch, the door of the tavern, the coins in your pocket, the hand you shake, is covered in a layer of bacteria that your modern body hasn't seen in 600 years. Back home, you use hand sanitizer if you touch a shopping cart. In 1347, the concept of germs doesn't even exist. People think sickness comes from bad smells or the stars being out of alignment. They dump their trash in the street where they walk. They share beds with their farm animals. Your modern immune system is going to see all of this and just panic. It's going to see 10,000 different enemies at once, and it won't know which one to hit first. While your body is trying to figure out how to handle a basic stomach bug from the dirty water, the real killers are going to walk right through the front door. You're basically a visitor from a bubble. You've been kept safe by technology, medicine, and clean pipes. But once you step out of that bubble and into the grit of the 14th century, you're going to find out really quickly that your body has forgotten how to be a hunter. It's been a pet for too long, and in 1347, the wolves are everywhere. So, you've just stepped off your imaginary time machine, and you're standing in the middle of a street. It's early 1347. Maybe you're in London, or maybe you're in Paris. It doesn't really matter which one, because they both smell exactly the same. They smell like a punch to the face. You're used to the smell of car exhaust, or maybe some trash that sat out too long in the sun. Forget all that. This is the smell of 100,000 people and animals living in a space designed for a tenth of that, with absolutely nowhere for the waste to go. Look down at your feet. You're probably wearing nice sneakers or boots. Within 30 seconds, they're ruined. There are no paved roads here. It's just dirt. But it isn't dry dirt. It's a thick, black, sticky sludge. And it isn't just mud made from rain. Every morning, people in those houses leaning over the street open up their windows and just toss their buckets out. They don't look first. They just dump whatever they did in the bathroom last night right onto the ground where you're standing. That waste mixes with the rain and the horse manure to create a soup that never really goes away. You see a group of kids running past you. They're barefoot. They're splashing through that black soup like it's a swimming pool. They don't have a choice. This is just what the ground looks like. There are no sewers under the street. There are no pipes carrying the gross stuff away to a treatment plant. It just sits there, right under your nose, until a heavy rain washes it into the river. And guess what? That river is where most people get their water. Walk a little further and look at the houses. They're packed together so tight you can barely see the sky. And they aren't just full of people. You're going to see a guy leading a string of pigs right through the middle of the crowd. He's not going to a farm. He's going to his backyard. People live shoulder to shoulder with their livestock. If you're a regular person in 1347, you probably have chickens in your kitchen and maybe a cow or some goats in a shed that's literally attached to your bedroom. This means you're breathing in everything those animals are putting off. You're covered in the dust from their feathers and the dander from their fur. And where there are animals and waste, there are flies. They are everywhere.
They're landing on the bread the baker just took out of the oven. They're landing on your face. They're landing on the open cuts on that guy's arm over there. Nobody is swatting them away because it's a losing battle. You just get used to the buzzing. Then there are the rats. You've probably seen a rat in a subway station and felt grossed out. Here, the rats are like the neighborhood pets, except nobody wants them. They aren't hiding, they're bold. You'll see them scurrying across the rafters in a tavern or ducking under a pile of rotting straw in the corner of a room. They live in the walls and they sleep in the thatch of the roofs. When you go to bed, you can hear them moving above your head. They eat the same grain you're planning to turn into bread tomorrow. They leave their droppings on your table. It's just part of the deal. You're also going to notice how crowded everything is. There's no such thing as personal space. If you want to buy a loaf of bread, you're pushing through a crowd of people who haven't had a real bath with hot water and soap in, well, ever. They might wash their faces and hands, but their clothes are caked with the sweat of a dozen summers. When someone coughs, they don't do that polite thing where they hit their elbow. They just let it fly. You're breathing in a cloud of whatever they've got. And here's the kicker. This is a good day. This is 1347, before everything goes south. There's no war in the streets right now. The crops were okay last year, so people aren't starving. This is what normal looks like. People are laughing, they're trading wool, they're arguing over the price of a jug of ale. They think they're doing just fine. But you're a modern human. Your body has spent its whole life in a world of filtered air, chlorinated water, and doctors who tell you to wash your hands for 20 seconds. You've been living in a bubble, and you just stepped out of that bubble and into a world that is basically one giant, unwashed petri dish. Your immune system is looking at the sludge on your shoes and the flies on your food, and it's starting to panic. It's like being a tourist who walked into a boxing ring with a heavyweight champion. You haven't even seen the main event yet, and you're already in way over your head. This is the baseline. This is the starting line. And from here, things are only going to get faster and a whole lot deadlier. So, you've just stepped off the boat, or maybe you just walked through the city gates of a place like London or Florence in the year 1347. You've listened to all the warnings, and you think you're ready, but you haven't even seen a single person with a cough or a boil yet. You're just a person who's been traveling, and right now you have two very basic human needs. You're thirsty and you're hungry. In your world, back in the 21st century, these are easy problems to fix. You find a sink, you turn a handle, and clean, cold water comes out. You go to a grocery store and buy a sandwich that's been wrapped in plastic and kept at a perfect 40 degrees. You don't even think about it. But here, in 1347, the simple act of having lunch is about to turn into a life or death struggle. Your modern immune system is about to get hit by a freight train, and it's not even the Black Death doing the driving. Let's start with that thirst. You've been walking through narrow, muddy streets. It's hot. You find a public well in the middle of a square. The water looks clear enough. It's cold. You see a local man dip a wooden bucket in, pull it up, and take a long drink. He wipes his mouth, looks fine, and walks away. So you do the same. You grab a ladle, dip it in, and gulp down a pint of it. Here is the problem. That well isn't as clean as it looks. About 50 feet away, there's a shallow pit where the local tavern dumps its waste. When it rains, everything in that pit seeps through the soil and straight into the water table. The guy you just saw drinking it, He's lived here his whole life. His gut is like a brick wall. He's been exposed to the local bacteria since he was a toddler. His body knows the neighborhood bullies, and it knows how to keep them in check. But you? You're from a world where water is filtered, chemically treated, and tested by scientists every single day. Your gut is like a five-star hotel that's never had a rowdy guest. And you just invited in a whole army of E. coli. Within an hour of that drink, those bacteria are already setting up shop in your intestines. They're multiplying by the millions, but you don't feel it yet. You just feel a little better because you aren't thirsty anymore. Now you're hungry. You find a vendor selling meat pies or maybe some thick pottage, which is basically a slow-cooked stew. It's been sitting in a big iron pot over a low fire all day. You see flies landing on the edge of the pot. You see the cook handle the meat with hands that haven't seen soap in a month. You buy a bowl anyway because you have to eat. This is where the salmonella comes in. It's hiding in that undercooked pork or on the surface of the dirty bowl. You eat the whole thing. It tastes okay, a bit salty, a bit gamey, and for a second, you might actually survive this trip. You're now 4 hours into your stay. You've checked into a local inn. It's a cramped room with straw on the floor. You lay down to get some rest. Around hour 6, the piece ends. It starts with a dull ache in your lower stomach. It's a cramp, but it's not the kind you get from doing too many sit-ups. It feels like someone is taking a wet towel and wringing it out inside your gut. Your immune system has finally sounded the alarm. It's realized that there are invaders in the building, and it doesn't have a plan to talk them out. It decides that the only way to save you is to flush everything out as fast as humanly possible. By hour 8, you aren't sleeping. You're hovering over a bucket in the corner of the room. This isn't just a regular case of the runs. This is violent. Your body is dumping water into your intestines to try and wash the E. coli and salmonella away. You're sweating, but you're shivering at the same time. You're losing fluids at a rate your body can't keep up with. Think about what happens to you when you get bad food poisoning today. You go to the bathroom, you feel miserable, and then you crawl to the fridge and drink a liter of Gatorade or some bottled water. You might even call a doctor and get a prescription to stop the vomiting. You don't have any of that here. The only thing you have to drink is the water from that well outside. But that water is exactly what put you in this mess. If you drink it to stay hydrated, you're just adding more fuel to the fire. You're pouring more bacteria into a system that's already failing. By hour 12, the dehydration is starting to change how your brain works. You're dizzy. When you try to stand up from the bucket, the room spins. Your heart is racing because your blood is actually getting thicker. There's less water in your veins, so your heart has to work twice as hard to push that sludge around your body. Your kidneys are starting to scream for help. They need water to filter out toxins, but there isn't any to spare. Now it's hour 18. You're lying on that straw floor because you're too weak to get back to the bed. The locals don't think much of it. People die of the flux all the time. It's just part of life in 1347. Nobody is coming to give you an IV drip. Nobody is bringing you a clean electrolyte drink. Your modern immune system, which is so good at fighting off the stuff it knows, is completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of these primitive, aggressive bacteria. It's fighting a war on two fronts, salmonella from the meat and E. coli from the water, and it's losing. By the time the sun starts to come up on your first 24 hours, you are a wreck. You've lost pounds of water weight. Your eyes are sunken. Your skin stays pinched if you poke it. You're so weak,
You can barely lift your head to look at the door. You came here worried about the plague, the big killer that everyone talks about. But you didn't even make it to the first symptom of the Black Death. You were taken out by a glass of water and a bowl of stew. The locals are walking past your door, going to market, living their lives. They're fine, because their bodies have spent years learning how to survive this filth. They've built up a messy, complicated peace treaty with the bacteria in their environment. You walked into that environment with a clean system, and in less than a day, that cleanliness has become your biggest weakness.
You aren't just in a different time. You're on a different planet. And your body doesn't have the map to get you through the first night. You're 24 hours in, and the real trouble hasn't even started yet. So you're standing there, 24 hours into your stay in the middle of the 14th century. You think you've handled the worst of it because you haven't dropped dead yet, but you're wrong. Up until now, you've been worried about the big stuff, like the Black Death or getting stabbed in a back alley. You aren't looking at the real killers because they're too small to see from a distance. I'm talking about the roommates. In 1347, everyone has them. If you're a king, you have them. If you're a peasant, you definitely have them. They live in your hair. They hide in the seams of your wool tunic, and they're burrowed into the straw mattress you're trying to sleep on. We're talking about fleas, body lice, and bed bugs. And they aren't just an annoyance. For a modern person like you, they are a biological disaster. See, you grew up in a world with hot showers, laundry detergent, and bug spray. Your immune system is basically a spoiled rich kid. It has never had to deal with a real, sustained invasion. Back in 1347, people's bodies were used to being bitten. Their immune systems knew how to stay calm when a flea took a drink. They might get a little red bump, but their body didn't treat it like an end-of-the-world event. Your body is different. The second those first few fleas jump onto your ankles, your immune system sees them and hits the panic button. It's never felt this before. Within minutes, your mast cells start dumping a chemical called histamine into your blood. It's an all-hands-on-deck alarm. You don't just get one or two itchy spots. You get dozens, then hundreds. Because you're wearing the same heavy wool clothes every single day, the bugs don't leave. They stay in your armpits. They crawl along your waistline. Your modern skin, which is used to soft cotton and daily soap, starts to react violently. Those tiny bites turn into huge, angry welts. You're having a massive allergic reaction to the saliva these bugs inject when they bite you. Your skin starts to puff up and turn a deep, painful red. You aren't just itchy anymore. You feel like you're wearing a shirt made of stinging nettles. You want to jump out of your own skin, but there's nowhere to go. Then comes the scratching. You can't help it. It's a reflex. But look at your hands. You've been touching wooden railings covered in grime, handling dirty coins, and walking through streets that are basically open sewers. Your fingernails are caked with bacteria that hasn't been seen in the modern world for centuries. Every time you scratch one of those welts, you're tearing your skin open, you're creating tiny doorways, and you are hand-delivering 14th century filth directly into those wounds. You're pushing staph and strep bacteria right into your bloodstream. Within 48 hours, those bites aren't just itchy bumps anymore. They're turning into sores. They start to leak fluid. They get crusty and yellow. Your lymph nodes in your neck and armpits start to swell up as they try to filter out the infections you just gave yourself. You're starting to run a fever, and it isn't even the plague yet. It's just the result of being a modern human who doesn't know how to live with bugs. Now try to get some rest. You're exhausted. Your skin is on fire, and your head is throbbing. You lay down on a pile of hay or a thin wool blanket, but the dark is when the bedbugs come out.
In the modern world, a bedbug infestation is a reason to burn your furniture. In 1347, it's just Tuesday night. They crawl out of the floorboards and the thatch in the ceiling. They find the patches of skin you haven't scratched raw yet. You feel things crawling across your forehead. You feel a sharp pinch on your eyelid. You try to swat them away, but there are too many. This is where the real damage happens. You can't sleep, not really. You might pass out for 20 minutes at a time, but you keep waking up to the sensation of things moving on you. By the third night, you're officially sleep-deprived. When you don't sleep, your immune system stops working. Your body stops making T cells, which are the soldiers that fight off real viruses. Your brain starts to get foggy. Your coordination goes out the window. You're stumbling around the streets of a medieval city, covered in infected sores, shaking from a fever, and your internal defenses are completely fried. Your immune system is so busy overreacting to flea bites and fighting off skin infections that it has nothing left in the tank. It's exhausted. It's spent all its ammunition on the small stuff. And that's the real tragedy here. You're burning through all your energy just trying to survive the everyday bugs that everyone else ignores. You're weak, you're tired, and your skin is a map of open wounds. You've become the perfect host. You are wide open. And just as your body hits its breaking point, you hear a sound from the house next door. Someone is coughing. Not a normal cough, but a deep, wet sound that ends in a gasp. The real test is finally here. The actual Black Death has arrived in your neighborhood. And you're starting the fight with an empty gas tank and a body that's already falling apart. You're about to go 10 rounds with the greatest killer in human history, and you haven't even had a good night's sleep in 3 days. This isn't a fair fight. It never was. You're about to find out exactly what happens when a modern body meets a medieval reality. And it isn't going to be pretty.
You're lying on a thin mat of straw that smells like old sweat and damp earth. Your fever is so high that the room won't stop spinning. You've got these lumps under your arms and in your groin that feel like hot coals pressed against your skin. You're desperate. You'd give anything for a Tylenol, a cold Gatorade, or even just a clean glass of water. But those things won't be invented for hundreds of years. You cry out for help, and someone hears you. You think a doctor is coming to save you. But in 1347, the doctor is the last person you want to see walk through that door. See, the guy who shows up isn't a doctor like you know them. He didn't go to medical school. He's probably the local barber. He spends his mornings cutting hair and his afternoons pulling teeth or chopping off gangrenous legs. He doesn't believe in germs because he doesn't know they exist. He thinks you're sick because your humors are out of balance. He thinks you have too much blood, or maybe God is just angry at you. Either way, his solution is going to involve a sharp piece of metal and a lot of your internal fluids. He looks at those painful lumps on your neck and nods. He says your blood is hot and stagnant, and the only way to save you is to let some of it out. He pulls out a small triangular knife called a phleam. It's dirty. He used it on a guy with a skin infection 2 hours ago and just wiped it on his apron.
He finds a vein in your arm and makes a deep slice. You're already incredibly dehydrated. The plague has been making you sweat and vomit for days. Your heart is already working overtime, pumping like crazy to try and keep your organs alive while the bacteria shuts them down. And now this guy is watching your blood pour into a wooden bowl. He wants to take at least a pint. As the blood leaves your body, your blood pressure tanks. You feel cold. You feel like you're fading away. To the barber, this is a good sign. You've stopped thrashing around. You're quiet. He thinks he's calming your system down, but really, he's just starving your brain of oxygen. But he's not done. He takes that same dirty knife and hacks into the lumps. The pain is so sharp, it brings you right back to consciousness. A mix of blood and pus spills out. In a modern hospital, they'd clean this and give you massive doses of antibiotics. Here, he just leaves the wound open to the air. Or worse, he puts a poultice on it. That's a fancy word for a paste made of flour, herbs, and sometimes even dried human poop or crushed frogs. He's literally rubbing bacteria into an open wound on a body that's already losing the war. Now you're thirsty. You're begging for a drink. He says he has just the thing to purge the sickness from your stomach. He hands you a heavy cup. Inside is a mixture of wine, crushed emeralds if you're rich, and heavy metals like mercury or lead. He tells you to drink it all. You swallow it down because you don't have a choice. Mercury is a literal poison. As soon as it hits your stomach, it starts to eat away at your lining. It makes your gums swell and your teeth loosen. It causes your kidneys to start failing. You start shaking, not just from the fever anymore, but from the metal poisoning. Your body was already struggling to fight the plague, and now it has to deal with a chemical attack from the inside. The medicine is literally melting your insides. The barber looks at you and decides you need one more thing. He gives you a powerful laxative made of herbs that are basically toxic in high doses. Now, on top of everything else, you have uncontrollable diarrhea. This is the final nail in the coffin. You're losing fluids from every possible exit. Your skin turns gray. Your eyes sink back into your head. You're so weak you can't even lift your hand to wave him away. He stands up, wipes his bloody hands on his shirt, and tells your family that he's done all he can. He might even charge them a few silver coins for the service. He walks out the door, leaving you in a state that is 10 times worse than when he arrived. You didn't just have the plague. Now you have severe blood loss, mercury poisoning, multiple new infections from his dirty knife, and lethal dehydration. This is the reality of 1347. There is no rescue. There is no secret herbal remedy that the ancients knew about that we've forgotten. Their best ideas were things that actively killed people. Your modern immune system is amazing, but it can't fight a war on 5 fronts at once. It can't repair your veins, filter out mercury, fight off pond leech parasites, and kill the plague all at the same time. You're lying there, listening to the sound of his boots fading away down the street. The room is getting darker. You realize that in this time, the experts are more dangerous than the disease. You came here thinking your modern body made you a superhero, but as you feel your heart stutter and slow down, you realize that without the massive infrastructure of the 21st century, without clean needles, sterile water, and actual science, you're just another body in the straw. The medicine of 1347 didn't save people.
It just gave them a faster, more painful way to die. And for you, the clock is just about to run out. So the clock is ticking, and you're standing on the docks of Messina, Sicily. It's October 1347. The air still has that leftover summer heat, and the harbor is buzzing. Messina is a big deal back then. It's a hub. If you want the good stuff from the East, the silks, the spices, the expensive bits of life, it comes through here. People are hanging around the pier, waiting to make some money. They see 12 trading ships coming in from the Black Sea. At first, it's just another Tuesday. People are waving, they're getting the ropes ready, but as the ships get closer, something feels off. The way they're moving is wrong. They aren't being steered with any kind of purpose. They're just drifting, heavy and slow, like ghost ships. The ships hit the wooden docks with a dull thud. No one greets the harbor masters. No one throws a line down to the shore. It's quiet, too quiet. A few of the locals get curious and climb up the sides to see what's going on, and that's when the world changes. They step onto the deck and the smell hits them first. It's not just the smell of a dirty ship or salty air. It's the smell of a butcher shop that's been left out in the sun for a week. They look around and see the crew. Most of them are already dead. They're just slumped over the rigging or piled up in the corners of the deck. The ones who are still alive aren't doing much better. They're curled up in balls, shivering and groaning. They have these gross, dark swellings in their armpits and their groins. Some of these lumps are the size of an apple. They're hard, painful, and oozing a mix of blood and pus. The sailor's skin is covered in black spots, which is why people started calling it the Black Death later on. These guys can't even stand up. They're coughing up blood that looks like liquid coal. The people of Messina are terrified. They don't know what this is, but they know it's bad. They try to help at first, but the sailors are too far gone. Within hours, the city officials realize they have a nightmare on their hands. They tell the ships to get out. They actually force these dying crews to pull up their anchors and leave. They think if they just push the ships back into the ocean, the problem goes away. But they're wrong. They're so wrong. Because the killer isn't just the men on the boats. The real killers are already off the ship. While the humans were busy screaming and panic-stricken, the real invaders were making their move. These ships were full of grain and cloth, which is basically a 5-star hotel for black rats. These rats had been living in the cargo holds for months, and those rats weren't healthy either. They were dying by the hundreds. On those rats were thousands of tiny fleas. Here is how the biology of this disaster actually works. Inside those fleas is a bacteria called Yersinia pestis. This is the stuff that's about to wipe out half of Europe. This bacteria is a bit of a jerk. When a flea drinks the blood of an infected rat, the bacteria starts to multiply inside the flea's stomach. It grows so fast that it actually creates a physical plug in the flea's throat. Now the flea is starving. It's hungry, it's angry, and it can't get any food into its belly because of this bacterial wall. So what does a starving flea do? It bites everything it can find. It's frantic. When the rat it was living on dies and gets cold, the flea jumps off and looks for the next warm body. When these ships hit the docks in Messina, the rats didn't wait for an invite. They scrambled down the thick mooring ropes and scurried into the warehouses and the hay piles near the water. They died in the walls of the houses and under the floorboards of the shops. As those rats died, the fleas jumped. They jumped onto dogs. They jumped onto cats. And mostly, they jumped onto you. When a flea bites you, it tries to suck your blood, but it can't swallow because of that blockage in its throat. So it vomits. It pukes the bacteria straight into your bloodstream. Then it bites you again and pukes again. It's a delivery system designed by nature to be as efficient as possible. You wouldn't even notice it at first. It's just a tiny itch. You're at the market buying some bread, and you swat at your ankle. You think nothing of it. But that one little bite just dumped millions of Yersinia pestis cells into your system. They don't waste any time. They head straight for your lymph nodes. Those are the little filters in your body that are supposed to fight off germs. But this bacteria is too strong. It turns your own immune system against you. It starts to multiply inside those filters, which is why people get those huge, painful lumps called buboes. Back on the docks, the ships are being pushed back out to sea, but the damage is done. The rats are already in the grain supplies. The fleas are in the blankets of the local inns. The people who went on the ships to help the sailors are already walking back to their families. They're carrying the germ in their lungs now, too. That's the second way this thing moves. Once it gets into your blood, it can travel to your lungs. Then, every time you cough, you're spraying a mist of death into the air. Imagine the scene in the city as the sun starts to go down. The ships are gone, drifting away like bad memories. The people think they've dodged a bullet. They go home, they kiss their kids, they sit down for dinner. They feel a little tired, maybe a little chilly, but they figure it's just the stress of the day. They have no idea that the biological equivalent of a nuclear bomb just went off in their harbor. In 1347, nobody knew about germs. They thought the air was bad or that the stars were lined up the wrong way. They didn't see the rats. They didn't think twice about the fleas. To them, the world was still the same as it was yesterday. But the clock we talked about, it's not just ticking for you anymore. It's ticking for everyone in the city. The bacteria is moving through the streets faster than any rumor could. It's in the water, it's in the dirt, and it's in the very breath of the person standing next to you. By the time the next morning rolls around, the first few locals are going to wake up with a fever that feels like their blood is boiling. They're going to look in the mirror and see those first dark spots. They're going to feel those lumps starting to grow under their skin.
And they're going to realize that the ships didn't just bring silk and spice. They brought the end of the world. And you're standing right in the middle of it, with nothing but your modern immune system to protect you against a version of the plague that hasn't seen a human body in centuries. It's hungry, it's fresh, and it's just getting started.
So you're standing there in 1347, and the first thing you have to understand is that the enemy isn't the person coughing next to you. Not yet, anyway. The real killer is smaller than a grain of sand, and it's currently riding on a flea that just hopped onto your ankle. This flea is having a very bad day. It's infected with a bacteria called Yersinia pestis. Inside the flea's stomach, this bacteria has grown so much that it's actually formed a solid plug. The flea is starving because it can't get any food past that mass of bacteria. It's desperate. It's biting everything it touches, trying to eat. But every time it sucks in a bit of your blood, it hits that plug and bounces back. To clear the way, the flea vomits. It pukes thousands of these bacteria directly into your open wound. Now, you might think your modern immune system, bolstered by vitamins and clean water, would see this coming, but that's your first mistake. As soon as those bacteria hit your bloodstream, they don't start breaking things or causing a scene. They're much smarter than that. They act like a specialized special forces team. Your body has these first responder cells called neutrophils. Their job is to find invaders and eat them. Usually this works great, But Yersinia pestis has a trick. It has these tiny little syringes on its surface. When a white blood cell gets close, the bacteria injects it with a specific protein that basically paralyzes the cell's internal machinery. The white blood cell is still there, but it can't do its job. It can't eat the invader. It just sits there, useless. While your front-line guards are paralyzed, the bacteria starts to move. It doesn't just float around aimlessly. It hitches a ride. There's another type of immune cell called a macrophage. These are the big eaters of your immune system. They do manage to swallow the bacteria, but this is exactly what the plague wants. Once inside the macrophage, the bacteria doesn't die. It turns the cell into a sort of armored personnel carrier. It uses the cell's own movement to travel deeper into your body. It's essentially wearing your own immune system like a disguise. This allows it to bypass all the usual checkpoints and head straight for the heavy hitters of your defense, your lymph nodes. You have these lymph nodes all over your body, under your arms, in your groin, and around your neck. Think of them like the local police stations, where your body trains its most elite soldiers. Usually, if an infection gets this far, the lymph nodes go into overdrive and kill the threat. But because the bacteria arrived inside one of your own cells, the alarm bells don't go off until it's way too late. Once the bacteria gets inside the lymph node, it stops hiding. It breaks out of the host cell and starts making copies of itself at a terrifying speed. This is where the physical horror starts. As the bacteria multiplies, it produces a massive amount of toxins. Your lymph node, which is usually the size of a bean, starts to swell up. It gets bigger and bigger, filled with blood, dead cells, and trillions of bacteria. This is what people called a bubo. It turns hard, and then it turns black or purple. It's incredibly painful because the pressure inside is so high, it's literally stretching your skin to the breaking point. Your immune system finally realizes what's happening and sends everything it has to the lymph node. It's a total war. The problem is, the plague bacteria has evolved to thrive in the heat and inflammation of that fight. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. Now, you might be wondering why your modern body doesn't have an edge here. You've had your shots, you've lived in a sterile world, you're hardy. But that's actually your biggest weakness. Your immune system works on memory. It keeps a library of every germ it's ever fought, or every germ it's been trained to fight through a vaccine. Your library has entries for the flu, for chickenpox, and maybe for a few types of food poisoning. It does not have an entry for a 14th century strain of Yersinia pestis. To your body, this isn't just a new germ, it's an alien life form. It doesn't recognize the coat the bacteria wears. By the time your body figures out how to make a specific antibody to kill this thing, the bacteria has already won. In a modern hospital, we'd hit this with antibiotics and kill it in a few days. But you don't have those. You're in 1347. You have zero biological memory of this specific enemy, and the enemy is much faster than you are. Within 24 to 48 hours of that flea bite, the bacteria has finished its work in the lymph node and starts pouring back into your bloodstream. This is called septicemia. Once it's in your blood, it's game over. The bacteria starts to cause tiny blood clots all over your body. These clots plug up your smallest blood vessels, especially in your fingers, your toes, and your nose. Because the blood can't get through, the tissue starts to die while you're still alive. This is why the skin turns black. It's literally rotting on your bones. Your immune system is now so overwhelmed that it starts attacking everything, including you. This is called a cytokine storm. Your lungs start to fill with fluid, and your blood pressure drops to nearly zero. Your modern immune system is built for the world you live in now. It's built for a world where we've mostly won the war against these kinds of massive bacterial attacks. Because of that, your body is actually softer than the people living in the Middle Ages. Their ancestors had been surviving smaller outbreaks of things for generations. They had some genetic resistance, however small. You're a blank slate. You're a fresh field of grass, and the plague is a wildfire. There's nothing to slow it down. It doesn't care that you're from the future. It doesn't care that you're healthy. It just sees a massive, unprotected fuel source, and it's going to burn through you until there's nothing left. As the bacteria continues to spread through your blood, it eventually reaches your lungs. This is the final stage of the biological takeover. Once it's in your lungs, the bacteria changes its strategy again. It stops being a blood-borne invader and becomes an airborne one. Every time you take a breath, you're now teeming with the very same bacteria that started in that flea's stomach. When you cough, you're spraying millions of these special forces units into the air around you. You've gone from being the victim of the biological attack to being the primary delivery system. Your body has been completely hijacked. It didn't take weeks. It didn't even take a full 7 days. From the moment that flea vomited on your ankle, your modern defenses were already obsolete. You were a walking ghost before you even felt the first fever. So there you are, standing in the middle of a crowded 14th century street. You feel fine. Maybe you have a little itch on your ankle where that flea got you, but that's it. You think you've got time. You think your modern body, raised on clean water and vitamins, is going to put up a fight. But I'm telling you, the clock is already at zero. Your immune system is looking for a fair fight, and the plague doesn't play by the rules. For the first 24 hours, you won't even know you're dying. Inside your body, the bacteria, it's called Yersinia pestis, is moving through your pipes. It doesn't just sit there. It hitches a ride on your lymphatic system. Think of your lymph system like the drainage pipes of your body. It's supposed to carry away the waste and help your white blood cells find the bad guys. But this bacteria uses those pipes like a highway. It heads straight for the nearest security checkpoint, which is your lymph nodes. By day 2, you start to feel a bit off. You might think it's just a cold or the fact that you haven't had a decent meal since you got here. You get a little headache. Maybe you feel a bit tired. But inside, the bacteria has reached your lymph nodes in your groin, your armpits, or your neck. Usually, these nodes are the size of a pea. They're your body's filters. But the plague bacteria doesn't just get caught in the filter. It takes over the whole building. It starts multiplying like crazy. It's turning your own defense system into a factory for more bacteria. On day 3, the hammer drops. This isn't a normal flu. You wake up and your temperature isn't just high, it's screaming. We're talking 104 or 105 degrees. Your brain feels like it's being cooked in your skull. You start shaking so hard you might actually chip a tooth. These are called rigors, and they happen because your internal thermostat is broken. You're freezing and burning at the exact same time. This is when the buboes show up. You look down at your groin or under your arm and you see a lump. At first, it's the size of an almond. A few hours later, it's the size of an orange. It's hard, it's throbbing, and it's turning a nasty shade of purple or black. That's where the name the Black Death comes from. These are your lymph nodes literally bursting with bacteria and dead blood cells. They're so painful that even the weight of your clothes touching them makes you want to scream. There is no position you can sit or lie in that doesn't feel like someone is shoving a hot coal into your skin. By day 4, the situation goes from bad to a nightmare. The bacteria has broken out of the lymph nodes and entered your bloodstream. This is called septicemia. Once it's in your blood, it's everywhere. Your body starts to panic. It tries to clot the blood to stop the infection, but it overdoes it. Tiny blood clots start forming inside your veins all over your body. These clots plug up the small vessels in your fingers, your toes, and your nose. Because the blood can't get through, the skin starts to die. You watch your own fingertips turn gray, then blue, and then a deep, oily black. Your skin is literally rotting while you are still awake to see it. This is also when the vomiting starts. You aren't just throwing up your last meal. You're throwing up blood. The lining of your stomach is starting to break down and bleed. The blood sits in your stomach for a bit, turns dark because of the acid, and when it comes up, it looks like coffee grounds. You can't keep water down. You can't even swallow your own spit. Your breath starts to smell like a literal garbage can because of the decay happening inside your throat and lungs. On day 5, your organs start to quit. Your kidneys are the first to go. They can't filter the gunk in your blood anymore, so your body starts poisoning itself from the inside. Your heart is working 10 times harder than it should just to push that thick, clot-filled blood through your system. You're confused. You're probably hallucinating by now. You might see people who aren't there, or think you're back home in your own bed. This is the delirium hitting. Your brain is shutting down because it isn't getting enough oxygen and it's soaked in toxins. If you had a bottle of antibiotics, you could end this right now. A few pills of streptomycin or even simple tetracycline would wipe out the bacteria in a couple of days. You'd be weak, but you'd live. But you don't have a pharmacy. He might take a hot iron and press it against your buboes to try and pop them. All that does is give you a massive burn on top of a deadly infection and send you into shock faster. By the end of day 5 or the start of day 6, your blood pressure bottoms out. This is the final stage, total septic shock. Your heart can't keep up the pressure anymore. Your lungs start to fill with fluid, making every breath sound like you're sucking air through a wet sponge. You're gasping, but you can't get any oxygen. Your skin is a mottled mess of purple blotches and black patches. From the second that flea jumped on you to the moment your heart stops, it's been about 144 hours. That's it. 6 days. Your modern immune system, with all its advantages, didn't stand a chance because it had never seen anything this aggressive. It spent 3 days trying to figure out what the problem was, and by the time it realized it was at war, the enemy had already captured the capital city and blown up the bridges. You die in a dark room, likely alone, because everyone who was supposed to take care of you fled the moment they saw those black lumps on your neck. They knew what was coming. They knew the timeline as well as I do. In 1347, the distance between a simple itch on your ankle and a cold grave was exactly 6 days. You didn't die because you were weak. You died because you were a 21st century human trying to fight a 14th century war with a map that didn't work anymore. You were out of time before you even knew the clock had started. So you're standing there in the middle of 1347, thinking you've got this all figured out. You know about the rats, you know about the fleas, you've seen the documentaries. You think as long as you stay away from the garbage in the street and don't let a rodent crawl over your feet while you sleep,
you're going to be fine. You think your modern knowledge is a shield. You've got your plan. You'll find a clean room, you'll lock the door, and you'll just wait for the whole thing to blow over. But here's the problem. The disease you're fighting isn't just one thing. It doesn't play by one set of rules. While you were busy looking at the floor for rats, the germ was busy changing its entire game plan. It stopped being a blood disease and started being a breath disease. That broken map I mentioned, this is where it leads you off a cliff. Your body is ready for a fair fight, but the plague doesn't do fair. It mutates. See, the bacteria, Yersinia pestis, usually likes to hang out in your lymph nodes. That's what gives you those big, painful lumps in your neck or your armpits. That's the bubonic version. It's gross and it kills a lot of people, but you have to actually get bitten by a flea to get it. If you can stay away from the fleas, you have a chance. But then something happens. The bacteria gets tired of waiting for a flea to hop from one person to the next. It finds a shortcut. It hitches a ride in your bloodstream and travels straight to your lungs. Once the bacteria hits your lungs, everything changes. The game is over before you even realize the rules shifted. This is called the pneumonic plague. It's the version of the Black Death that nobody talks about as much, but it's way scarier. When it gets into your lungs, it starts to multiply fast. It doesn't just sit there. It starts eating away at the tissue. Your lungs start to fill up with fluid and blood. Your body realizes something is very wrong, so it does the only thing it knows how to do when something is in your lungs. It makes you cough. Now think about that for a second. In the bubonic version, the bacteria is trapped inside those lumps. It needs a bug to bite you, suck up the germ, and then bite someone else. That's a slow process. But once it's in your lungs, you become the delivery system. Every time you take a breath, every time you clearing your throat, and especially every time you let out a hard, hacking cough, you are spraying millions of bacteria into the air. You've turned into a biological fog machine. This is why your plan to hide in a room is a total failure. You think you're safe because you haven't seen a rat in days. You've scrubbed the floor. You've even washed your hands. But the person in the room next to you, they're sick. You can hear them through the thin wooden walls. They're coughing. It's a wet, heavy sound. You don't think much of it because, hey, it's the Middle Ages. Everyone has a cold, right? Wrong. Every time that person coughs, they are sending out a cloud of invisible death. Those tiny droplets stay in the air. They float. They drift under the door. They hang around in the damp, still air of the house. You're sitting there, breathing deep, thinking you're doing great. But with every breath, you're pulling that bacteria deep into your own lungs. You don't need a flea bite. You don't need to touch a dead body. You just have to be in the same zip code as a sick person's exhale. This made the plague airborne. It turned a slow-moving disaster into a wildfire. It didn't matter if you were the cleanest person in Europe, if you walked past the wrong person in a crowded market, or if you shared a meal with someone who was just starting to feel a tickle in their throat, you were done. Your modern immune system looks at this and just freezes. It's looking for a virus, like the flu or a cold. It's waiting for something it recognizes. But this isn't a virus. It's a massive, aggressive bacteria that is literally melting your lungs from the inside out. The speed of this version is what really ruins you. With the bubonic plague, you might last a week. You'd have a fever, you'd get the lumps, and you'd feel like garbage. but you had a window of time. With the mnemonic version, that window slams shut. From the moment you breathe in those droplets to the moment you stop breathing entirely can be as little as 24 hours. You wake up feeling okay. By lunch, you have a headache. By dinner, you're coughing up bright red blood. By the next morning, your lungs are so full of fluid that you basically drown on dry land. You see, the time traveler's mistake is thinking they can outsmart the environment. You think because you know about germs you can avoid them, but in 1347 the germs are everywhere. They are in the dust, they are on the clothes of the person walking behind you, and they are in the very air you need to survive. You can't stop breathing. And in a world where every single person around you is a potential sprayer for the deadliest bacteria in human history, breathing is the most dangerous thing you can do. The people living back then didn't understand this, obviously. They saw people dying and thought it was bad air or a punishment from God. They weren't entirely wrong about the air part, but they didn't know how to fix it. They'd close their windows, which actually made it worse because it trapped the infected droplets inside the house with them. They'd huddled together for comfort, which just meant they were all breathing each other's poison. It was a perfect trap. You, with your 21st century brain, would realize what's happening. You'd see the red phlegm on the floor, and you'd know exactly what it means. You'd know that the air in the room is a weapon. But what are you going to do? You don't have a mask. You don't have antibiotics. You don't have a way to filter the air. You're just a human being who needs oxygen, standing in a room full of people who are accidentally killing you with every breath they take. Your modern immune system is great at fighting off things we deal with today. It knows how to handle a bit of food poisoning or a seasonal sniffle. But it has no memory of this. It has no plan for a bacteria that bypasses all your external defenses and goes straight for the organs that keep you alive. You aren't just fighting a disease, you're fighting a mutation that turned the very act of living into a suicide mission. You could be the smartest person in the world. You could have a PhD in biology, but when you're standing in a 14th century kitchen and the person across the table sneezes, all that knowledge is worthless. The bacteria enters your nose, travels down your windpipe, and sets up shop. It doesn't care that you know its name. It doesn't care that you know how it works. It just does what it's designed to do. It grows, it spreads, it kills. The reality of 1347 isn't that you weren't clean enough. It's that the disease was more adaptable than you were. It changed the rules of the game while you were still reading the instruction manual for the old version. You were looking for rats. The plague was looking for your lungs. And in that battle, the plague wins every single time. You were out of time before you even took your first breath of medieval air. The clock didn't just start. It was already ticking down to zero the moment you arrived. So the clock hit zero. You're standing there in 1347. And you've just realized that your modern medicine and your clean habits don't mean much if you can't find a sandwich. We take food for granted. You probably have a fridge full of stuff right now, or at least a grocery store 5 minutes away. But in the middle of the Black Death, the entire system for getting food into your belly just falls apart. It doesn't happen over a few months. It happens in weeks. Sometimes days. You're going to get hungry fast. Your body is used to 3 meals a day, maybe some snacks in between. When you don't get that, your brain starts to panic. You decide you need to find some food, and you head out into the countryside. You figure, hey, it's the Middle Ages. Everyone is a farmer, right? There should be food everywhere. You imagine big barns full of grain and gardens full of vegetables. But when you get to the first farm, you realize something is very wrong. The first thing you notice isn't the smell of the plague, it's the sound of the animals. You hear cows. They aren't just mooing, they are screaming. It's a high, thin sound that sets your teeth on edge. See, a dairy cow has to be milked. If a human doesn't do it, their udders get so full they start to throb and ache. Eventually, they get infected. The cows are wandering around the fences, bumping into things, desperate for someone to help them. But the guy who usually milks them is lying in a heap in the doorway of his house. He's been there for 2 days. His wife is right next to him. They didn't even have time to get into bed. You look past the house and see the wheat fields. From a distance, they look fine. It's a huge sea of gold. You think to yourself, okay, I can just grab some of that grain and boil it. It's better than nothing. But as you walk into the field, you see the disaster. It rained a few days ago. Normally, the farmer would have been out there with his neighbors, cutting the wheat and stacking it up to dry. But there are no neighbors. Everyone is either dead or too weak to hold a scythe. So the wheat is just sitting there in the mud. It's starting to sprout and rot. There are black spots of fungus growing on the ears. If you eat that, you'll get a different kind of sick, the kind that makes you hallucinate and feel like your skin is on fire. The pigs are out too. They've broken out of their pens because nobody was there to throw them any scraps. They're running through the village, rooting through the trash, and honestly, eating things you don't want to think about. They're aggressive and hungry. You try to catch one, but you're a modern person. You don't know how to catch a 100-pound animal with your bare hands. It knocks you over and runs into the woods. Now you're starting to feel the first real effects of starvation. It isn't just a rumbly stomach. It feels like a hollow ache right behind your belly button. Your head starts to throb. You feel lightheaded every time you stand up too fast. This is your body realizing that the fuel tank is empty. It starts looking for anything it can burn. First, it goes for your fat. You might think that's a good thing, but in 1347, fat is your life insurance. Once that's gone, your body starts eating your muscles. You feel your strength just evaporate. Your arms feel heavy. Your legs feel like they're made of lead. This is the part where your modern immune system starts to fail you. Your immune system is like a high-tech army. It has soldiers, scouts, and specialized weapons. But an army needs to be fed. It takes a huge amount of energy to create white blood cells. It takes energy to run a fever, to burn out a virus. When you stop eating, your brain has to make some tough calls. It's like a captain on a sinking ship. It decides to keep the heart pumping and the lungs moving, but it cuts the power to everything else. The immune system is the first thing to get its budget cut. Your body stops making those soldier cells. The ones you already have get slow. They're like guards who haven't slept in 3 days. They're leaning against the wall, eyes half closed, not really watching the gate. And the plague? The plague is the ultimate opportunist. It's been sitting on the sidelines, waiting for a weakness. It's in the fleas on the rats that are scurrying around that dead farmer's house. It's in the cough of the one person you passed on the road who was trying to run away. In your normal life, your body could probably put up a fight. You'd have the protein and the vitamins to give your cells a chance to win. But now you're running on fumes. You find a cellar in an abandoned house. You're desperate. You find some old turnips in a corner. They're soft and covered in dirt, and they smell like dirt, too. You eat them raw. You don't even care. But it's not enough. It's a few hundred calories when your body needs thousands just to fix the damage you've already done. You realize there is no help coming. There is no Red Cross. There are no food banks. The supply chain didn't just break, it vanished. In the 1300s, you ate what was grown within 5 miles of your house. If those 5 miles are full of dead people, there is no food. It's a total collapse. You see a cart on the road, and for a second, you hope it's full of bread. You run over to it, tripping on your own feet because you're so weak. But the cart is full of bodies. The person driving it died while they were moving them, and the horse just stopped when it got tired. Your skin starts to look gray. Your eyes are sunken in. You look in a piece of broken glass, and you don't even recognize yourself. You look like a ghost. This is what starvation does. It strips away your humanity before it even kills you. You're so tired that you just want to lay down in the dirt and sleep. But you know if you do that, you aren't getting back up. Your immune system is now completely offline. It's like a city where the power grid has failed. The street lights are out, the communication is down, and the gates are wide open. You aren't just vulnerable to the plague anymore. You're vulnerable to everything. A simple cold could kill you now. A small cut on your hand from those rotten turnips could turn into a massive infection because your body doesn't have the resources to heal the skin.
You came here thinking your modern body was a fortress. You thought your childhood nutrition made you invincible. But a fortress without a food supply is just a fancy tomb. You've been here for maybe a week, and you've already lost the biggest advantage you had. You are weak, you are starving, and your internal defenses have quit. The plague doesn't even have to try hard anymore. It's just going to walk right in and take over. You aren't a time traveler anymore. You're just another hungry person waiting for the end in a world that has run out of bread. You're standing there in the middle of a dirt street, and it hits you. The hunger is bad, sure. Your stomach is doing flips because you haven't had a real meal in days. But the hunger isn't the thing that's going to break you. It's the silence, or rather the way the silence gets interrupted. You start hearing this sound you'll never forget. It's the sound of a hammer hitting a nail into a solid oak door. You look down the street and see a group of men. They aren't doctors. They aren't even soldiers. They're just guys with badges and heavy tool belts. They're walking up to a house where someone was heard coughing an hour ago. They don't ask questions. They don't check pulses. They just heave a massive wooden plank across the front door and start driving those nails home. They're locking the doors from the outside. They're doing the same to the windows. Inside that house, you hear people screaming. They're begging. They're telling the guards that only one person is sick, that the kids are fine, that they have plenty of life left. The guards don't care. So they finish the job and move to the next house. If you're inside that house, you're done. You're trapped in a dark room with a dying relative and no way to get food or water. You're going to watch them go, and then you're going to follow them. This isn't a hospital. It's a coffin that happens to have a roof and a chimney. This is what happens when a society realizes that its leaders have no idea what they're doing. The rules we all live by, the idea that the police will help you or the government will save you, those rules just evaporate. When the plague really gets its teeth into a city, the people in charge stop trying to fix things and start trying to hide them. They think if they can just board up the sick people, the problem will go away. But it doesn't work like that. All they're doing is turning every neighborhood into a graveyard.
You see people watching this from their own windows, and you can see the exact moment they decide to leave. They don't pack suitcases. They don't grab heirlooms. They just grab a coat, maybe a hunk of dry bread, and they run. They don't even look back at their neighbors. They don't even look back at their own family members who look a little pale. It's a total every man for himself situation. You join the crowd heading for the gates. It's a mess. Thousands of people are trying to get out of the city all at once. They're pushing, shoving, and stepping over people who have collapsed in the mud. Everyone has the same idea: get to the countryside. They think the fresh air and the open space will protect them. They think the plague is a city problem. But here's the thing they don't realize, and since you're from the future, you know exactly how this ends. These people aren't escaping the plague, they're carrying it. Every person running for the hills is a potential carrier. They're taking the bacteria out of the crowded streets and hand-delivering it to every tiny village and farm for miles. They stop at a well for a drink. Now the well is a problem. They sleep in a farmer's barn for the night. Now that farmer and his whole family are on a countdown. It's like a massive slow-motion explosion of sickness spreading out from the city in every direction. As you're walking with them, trying to keep your distance, you start to feel something weird. It's not the plague, not yet. It's your own body reacting to the absolute horror around you. You're a modern person. You've had a pretty easy life compared to these people. You've never had to worry about your neighbors being nailed into their homes. You've never had to walk past piles of bodies that no one is brave enough to bury. Your brain is going into total overdrive. It's pumping out a chemical called cortisol. You've probably heard of it. It's the stress hormone. In small doses, it's great. It helps you run faster or stay awake when you're tired. But when you're under this kind of constant, crushing fear, your body starts to dump cortisol into your system like a fire hose. And this is where your modern immune system starts to fail you. Your body has a limited amount of energy. It's like a battery. When your brain is screaming that you're in danger every second of the day, it takes all that energy and puts it into your muscles and your heart. It wants you ready to fight or run. To do that, it has to take energy away from other things. The first thing it cuts? Your immune system. Your white blood cells, the little soldiers that are supposed to be hunting down that Yersinia pestis bacteria, they start to slow down. They don't get the signals they need. They don't reproduce as fast. Your body basically decides that fighting off a microscopic germ isn't as important as surviving the guy with the hammer or the stampede at the city gates. You're literally scaring yourself to death. The more stressed you are, the more your internal defenses shut down. You're a modern human with all the best genetic history, but you're handing the plague a master key to your front door. You can't sleep because you're terrified. You can't eat because your stomach is tied in knots. Without sleep and food, your immune system doesn't have the fuel it needs to build a defense. You see this happening to the people around you, too. They're exhausted. They're crying. They're screaming at the sky. Some people are even whipping themselves with leather straps, thinking that if they punish themselves, God will stop the sickness. You know that's not how it works, but the sheer insanity of it adds another layer of stress. You're watching the world lose its mind in real time. By the time you get a few miles out of the city, the peaceful countryside isn't what you expected. The roads are lined with people who just couldn't go any further. They're sitting in the ditches, waiting for the end. The villages you pass have their gates locked tight.
The people inside are standing on the walls with bows and pitchforks. They don't care if you're healthy. They don't care if you're a woman or a child. If you're from the city, you're the enemy. So now you're stuck. You can't go back to the city because it's a boarded-up death trap. You can't go forward because the villagers will kill you if you get too close. You're stuck in this no man's land where the only thing that's moving is the plague. Your heart is racing. Your hands are shaking. You try to tell yourself to calm down, to breathe, to think like a 21st century person. But your lizard brain doesn't care about your education. It only knows fear.
And that fear is doing more damage to your insides than the bad water or the lack of bread ever could. You're becoming a hollow shell. Your modern edge is gone. You're just a body, and your body is losing its will to fight back. You aren't just watching the end of a world. You're watching the end of your own defenses. The wall is down. The guards have left their posts, and something very small and very hungry is about to walk right in.
So you're standing there in the mud of a 1347 street. Your modern immune system is basically a high-tech security system with no power and the doors kicked open. You're a dead man walking. You just don't know it yet. I want to walk you through exactly how those last few days go down for you. It's not going to be pretty, and it's going to happen a lot faster than you think. The first thing that's going to get you isn't even the plague, it's the water. Think about your life right now. Every drop of water you drink has been filtered, treated, and cleaned. Your gut is used to a very specific, very safe world. The moment you take a drink from a medieval well or a local river, you're inviting a whole army of monsters inside. Within 24 hours, you're going to have a case of dysentery that would make a modern hospital stay look like a vacation. You're losing fluids faster than you can find them. You're cramping so hard you can't stand up. Your body is trying to flush out the bacteria, but it's flushing out everything else, too. You're getting weak, you're getting dehydrated, and you're getting desperate. Then comes the hunger. You can't just walk into a grocery store and buy a protein bar. You're eating what everyone else is eating, which is mostly coarse bread and thin vegetable soup, if you're lucky. That bread isn't the soft stuff from the store. It's full of grit and sawdust. It's hard to digest. You aren't getting the vitamins your body needs to keep its defenses up. Your modern muscles start to burn themselves for fuel. You're losing weight, you're losing energy, and your brain is starting to get foggy because your blood sugar is tanking. You aren't a fighter anymore. You're a victim. Now, let's talk about your new roommates. You have to sleep somewhere, and in 1347, that means a pile of straw or a dirty floor. You aren't alone. You've got lice in your hair and fleas in your clothes. One of those fleas has just come from a rat that died an hour ago in the alleyway. That flea is hungry. It jumps onto your leg and bites. When it bites, it doesn't just take your blood. It vomits a tiny bit of bacteria called Yersinia pestis right into your skin. This is the big one. This is the Black Death. In a person from 1347, their body might have seen something vaguely similar before. Their ancestors survived some versions of this. But you're a blank slate. Your white blood cells see this new invader, and they don't even know what to do. They don't have the instructions. They're like guards at a gate who have never seen a weapon before. They just stand there while the bacteria starts to multiply.
By the end of the first day after that bite, the bacteria has moved to your lymph nodes. These are the little drainage spots in your body, like your armpits and your groin. This is where the battle should be happening, but the bacteria is winning. Your lymph nodes start to swell up. They turn into these hard, painful lumps called buboes. They start out the size of an egg and just keep growing. They turn a nasty shade of purple or black. Every time you move your arm or try to walk, it feels like someone is shoving a hot needle into your joints. You're terrified, so you look for help. You find a local doctor. He's wearing a long robe, and he looks like he knows what he's doing, but he doesn't. He thinks your blood is too hot, or that you've breathed in bad air. He tells you he needs to bleed you. He takes out a sharp knife and cuts a vein in your arm. He lets a bowl fill with your blood. He thinks he's helping, but he's actually just killing you faster. Your immune system needs that blood to carry what few defenses you have left. Now you're even weaker. You're dizzy, you're pale, and you're losing the will to keep going. The doctor isn't done. He takes a mixture of dried herbs, some flour, and maybe even some animal droppings, and he rubs it into those open sores on your body. He's just introduced 5 new kinds of infections into your bloodstream. It's too much. Your system just gives up. By day 4, the plague has moved into your blood and your lungs. This is when things get really bad. You start coughing. At first, it's just a dry hack. Then, you start coughing up bright red, frothy blood. Every time you breathe, it sounds like you're sucking air through a wet sponge. That's your lungs filling up with fluid and bacteria. You can't get enough oxygen. Your fingernails and your lips start to turn blue. You're gasping for air, but there isn't enough in the room. The fever hits a point where you start to hallucinate. You aren't in 1347 anymore. You're seeing things that aren't there. Your brain is literally cooking itself. Your kidneys start to shut down because they can't filter all the junk in your blood. Your skin starts to develop these little black spots all over. That's internal bleeding. Your blood vessels are breaking down. You're leaking from the inside out. At this point, you've been in the past for maybe 2 weeks total. You thought your modern medicine and your superior genes would save you. But the truth is, you were built for a world of soap, vaccines, and clean toilets. Take those away, and you're more fragile than the peasants living around you. They at least have a gut used to the local germs. You're just a soft target. On the final night, you're lying on that straw bed. You're alone because everyone else is too scared to come near you. They can hear your ragged breathing from the street. Your heart is racing, trying to pump what little blood you have left to your brain, but it's a losing battle. Eventually, your heart just gets too tired. It skips a beat, then another. Your lungs take one last shaky breath, and that's it. You didn't build an empire. You didn't change history. You lasted about 17 days. The final verdict for a modern person in 1347? You're just another nameless body being tossed into a mass grave at the edge of town. Your modern immune system didn't make you a superhero. It just made you a very high-quality meal for a few fleas and a lot of bacteria. The wall didn't just fall. It was never there to begin with. You were a stranger in a world that was designed to kill you, and it did exactly that.
So you're dead in this little hypothetical trip to the past. You didn't make it. But here's the thing. A lot of people did. Not everyone ended up in a mass grave. Even when things were at their absolute worst, some people just
didn't get sick. Or they got a little sick and then bounced back. For a long time, we just thought they were lucky. We thought maybe they ate better food or stayed away from the rats. But it turns out luck had nothing to do with it. It was about their code. Their literal genetic blueprint was different from yours. Think about the world right after the plague moved through. It's quiet. Half the houses in your town are empty. The people who are left standing are the ones who survived the ultimate test. They weren't just survivors. They were the winners of a brutal, rigged lottery. And because they were the only ones left, they were the only ones having kids. This changed the entire human race in a way we are still feeling today. See, your immune system is like a high-tech security team, but it needs to know what to look for. Back in 1347, the plague had a skeleton key. It could get into almost anyone's system because it knew exactly which doors to kick down. But some people were born with a weird glitch. They had a mutation in their DNA. Scientists today call it the CCR5 Delta 32 gene, but that's a mouthful. Let's just call it the broken door. Normally, a germ needs to grab onto a specific spot on your white blood cells to get inside and start wrecking the place. It's like a key fitting into a lock. If the lock is there, the germ gets in and you're in trouble. But the people with this mutation had a lock that was shaped wrong. It was broken. The plague bacteria would show up with its key, try to turn the lock, and nothing happened. The germ couldn't get inside the cell. It couldn't replicate, so the person stayed healthy. Before 1347, this mutation was just a random mistake. It didn't really matter. But then the Black Death showed up and started killing everyone who had a normal door. Suddenly, having a broken door was the greatest advantage a human could have. It was the difference between life and death. The plague acted like a giant filter. It poured the whole human race through a sieve, and only the people with that specific genetic glitch stayed behind. This wasn't a slow change. It happened fast. In just a few generations, the percentage of people with this protective gene shot up. The human immune system didn't just get better by practice, it got a forced hardware upgrade. The survivors passed that broken door gene down to their children, and they passed it to theirs. We can actually see this in the data today. If you look at people with European ancestry, about 10% of them have this specific mutation. In other parts of the world where that specific plague didn't hit as hard, the mutation is much rarer. But it wasn't just about one gene. The Black Death forced our bodies to become more aggressive. It set our immune systems to a higher alert level. The survivors had systems that were primed to trigger inflammation at the slightest hint of trouble. They had to. If your body was slow to react in 1347, you were a goner. This aggressive stance became the new standard for the human race. It helped people survive the next few centuries of outbreaks, smallpox, and flu. There is a trade-off, though. There is always a catch. The reason you might struggle with things like allergies or asthma or Crohn's disease today is likely because of those survivors. Your immune system is so hyped up, so ready for a fight, that it sometimes starts attacking things it shouldn't, like pollen or even your own body. We have the immune systems of people who survived the apocalypse, but we live in a world with soap and antibiotics. We have a Ferrari engine stuck in a school zone. It's overkill. But back then, overkill was the only way to stay alive. The people who walked out of the 14th century were fundamentally different from the people who walked into it. Their blood was different. Their cells were tougher.
They were the start of a new version of humanity that was built to handle a world full of monsters. The plague didn't just kill people, it edited us. It took the human genome and cut out the parts that were weak. It was a cruel, horrible process, but it's the reason why your ancestors made it through. They were the ones with the broken doors. They were the ones who could stand in a room full of dying people and not catch a thing. So while your modern, pampered immune system might have folded like a card table in 1347, the survivors were busy building something new. They were building a shield that would last for 700 years. They didn't know about genes or proteins. They just knew they lived while others didn't. They went back to work, they rebuilt their towns, and they had kids who were just a little bit tougher than the ones who came before. That upgrade didn't happen because we got smarter. It happened because the world got deadlier, and we had no choice but to change or disappear. The next time you get a fever or an itchy nose from some hay fever, just remember, that's just your 1347 hardware trying to protect you from a ghost that hasn't been around for centuries. It's annoying, sure, but it's the reason you're here talking to me right now.
So you're sitting there with your seasonal allergies, eyes watering and nose running, probably cursing your ancestors for giving you an overactive immune system. It feels like a bad deal, right? You're sneezing because of a bit of grass or some cat hair. But let's step out of the 14th century for a minute and look at the world you actually live in. If we actually dropped you back into 1347 right now, it wouldn't be a fair fight. Your body is basically a high-tech smartphone trying to run on a dial-up connection from the Middle Ages. It's just not built for that environment anymore. But that doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're specialized. You're built for today. Think about it like this. The people who survived the Black Death had a specific set of tools in their blood. Their immune systems were like heavy-duty, clunky suits of armor. That armor was great for stopping a broadsword, which in this case was the plague. But that armor was heavy, it was hard to move in, and it caused other problems. Today, we don't really have to worry about broadswords. We worry about snipers. Our immune systems have evolved to be more like Kevlar vests. They're lighter, they're smarter, and they're designed for the specific threats of the 21st century. If you took a peasant from 1347 and put them on a modern city bus during flu season, they'd be in serious trouble. Their body wouldn't have a clue what to do with the various strains of the flu, the common cold, or even the mild bacteria we carry around on our skin every day. We breathe in stuff constantly that would have floored someone from the Middle Ages. We've grown up in a world full of different bugs, and our bodies have learned to handle them quietly in the background while we go get coffee. We like to think of evolution as this long ladder where we just keep getting better and better at everything, like we're leveling up in a video game and our stats just keep going up across the board. But that's not really how biology works. Evolution is just a reaction to what's happening right now. It's a survival game where the rules change every few hundred years. In 1347, the rule was simple. Either your body can recognize the plague and fight it off, or you die. Because of that, the survivors passed on those specific plague-fighting genes to their kids. But as the plague eventually died out and the world changed, those genes weren't as helpful as they used to be. The rules changed again. Over the last few hundred years, we faced smallpox. Then we faced cholera. Then we hit the Spanish flu. Each time one of these massive killers swept through, The survivors were the ones whose bodies happened to have the right mutations to stay alive. We are the children of the survivors. Our immune systems are a map of every disaster our ancestors managed to walk away from. But that map is updated for the most recent stuff, not the old stuff. We've traded that ancient heavy armor for protection against the things that actually kill people today. We've also made a trade-off that is a bit annoying. Back then, you died because your body didn't know how to fight a specific deadly bacteria. Today, most of us in the modern world don't die from infectious diseases nearly as often. Instead, some of us get sick because our bodies are too good at fighting. Since we don't have many real monsters to fight, like the plague or giant parasites, our immune systems sometimes get bored and start attacking things that aren't actually dangerous. That's where your allergies come from. That's where things like asthma or certain gut problems come from. It's the price we pay for having an immune system that is constantly on high alert, looking for a fight. It's a trade-off. When you look at the big picture, it's a pretty good deal. But here is the real kicker, and the thing we often forget when we talk about how weak or strong our bodies are. We aren't just relying on our genes anymore. For the first time in the history of our species, we have a backup. We have an external immune system that our ancestors couldn't even dream of. I'm talking about basic things like clean water, soap, and refrigerators. Think about how much work your body doesn't have to do just because you can wash your hands or drink water that isn't full of waste. In 1347, if you got a nasty cut on your leg while working in a field, that could be the end of the story for you. You'd get an infection, your fever would spike, your body would try to fight it and fail, and you'd be gone in a week. Now, you put some antibiotic ointment on it, maybe see a doctor for a quick pill if it looks red, and you're back to your normal life by Monday. We have vaccines that teach our bodies how to fight off killers like polio or measles without us ever having to actually get sick. We have taken the burden off our biological hardware and put it onto our technology. So if you're wondering how long you'd last in 1347, the honest answer is probably not very long. Without our modern medicine and our modern environment, the old world would chew us up pretty fast. You'd be a fish out of water. But you know what? That's okay. You don't live in 1347. You live here. And your body is exactly what it needs to be to keep you alive in the world you actually inhabit. It is the result of millions of years of trial and error, of every single one of your ancestors being just tough enough to make it to the next day. Every time you get a fever and recover, or every time your body fights off a cold, that's your immune system doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's not a relic of the past. It's a modern machine. It's the reason you can sit here and talk to me. We should probably be a little more grateful for that, even if it makes us sneeze when the flowers bloom. It's doing its best to keep us in the game. We live in the safest time in human history, and we have the most advanced medical tools ever created at our fingertips. So the next time you're feeling a bit run down, just remember, you are the end result of a winning streak that goes back to the beginning of time. Your hardware might be different than it was in 1347, but it's the reason you're still standing. And honestly, I'll take a runny nose over the Black Death any day of the week.